I felt him pull out of me abruptly, but the wave of excitement still coursed through my body, leaving me trembling and breathless. I couldn't think straight, couldn't understand why he'd stopped. My body was still riding high, the shivers of pleasure refusing to fade. But as the intensity subsided, reality came crashing back, and I cursed under my breath, cursing myself for what had just happened. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. This wasn't how I ever imagined myself, over the moon by the man I hated. My body had betrayed me, responding to his rough touch with a pleasure I didn't want to acknowledge. Why had I come so hard? Why? The questions gnawed at me, shame and disgust swirling in my mind. How could I have let this happen? As I struggled to process it all, I felt him turn toward me. My heart raced, but not with the same fervour as before. This time, it was fear and humiliation. I kept my eyes shut tight, refusing to meet his gaze. I couldn't bear the thought of what I might see there: victory, disgust, or worse, indifference. I expected him to bark at me, to force me to open my eyes and look at him, to confront the shame I felt. Instead, I felt him unclasping my hands from the cuffs and help me stand on my feet. His touch was still firm, but there was no cruelty in it. My wrists ached as they were freed, the marks from the restraints burning into my skin. I kept my eyes closed. I wanted to hide from him, from myself, from the twisted mess this had all become. Why had I let this happen? Why had I responded to him, to the man I despised? The questions lingered, unanswered, as I stood there, feeling more vulnerable and lost than I ever had before. With my eyes still shut, I heard his footsteps recede, each one sending a tremor of uncertainty through me. The door creaked open, then closed with a finality that made my heart pound even harder. The silence that followed was deafening, pressing in on every side. Is he gone? I slowly opened my eyes, peeking through my lashes, my body still tense with anticipation. I turned my head slightly, scanning the dim room, my breath catching in my throat as I searched for any sign of him. But there was nothing. No movement, no presence. He was really gone. I let out a heavy breath, my body sagging with the release of tension. My knees wobbled and I stumbled to the edge of the bed, sitting down heavily. I buried my face in my hands, grumbling softly to myself. What am I really doing? I muttered, my voice shaky. Why is my heart racing so much? The room fell into an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of my breathing as I tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. Why hadn't he said anything? Why had he just walked away? The questions swirled in my mind, but the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. Then, like a bolt of lightning, the most terrifying thought struck me: the camera. My eyes flew open in panic as I quickly scanned the room, searching every corner, every shadow for any sign of surveillance. My heart raced even faster as I imagined him watching me, recording every humiliating moment. But after a frantic search, I exhaled in relief, finding no cameras hidden. This room must be so private and important to him that it had no cameras. Of course it should be. It's the place where he pleasures himself by torturing women. I grumbled, but then a shiver ran down my spine as the thought of being pleasured by him crept in. I hate my body for betraying me like that. I slowly got up, my legs unsteady beneath me. I reached down, grabbed my ripped dress from the floor, and slipped it back on before making my way out of the dungeon. When I reached his room, he was nowhere to be found. The room was eerily quiet, the air thick with the remnants of his scent. As I reached the door to head out into my given room to clean up, my eyes stopped on a small green piece of paper plastered on the door. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it off, the message written in sharp, commanding handwriting. At exactly 18:30, make sure you're ready. The driver will bring you to my location, and do as Florence and the others tell you to, or else it will be another problem for you. I stared at the note, my grip tightening as a cold dread settled in my stomach. The words were clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I crumpled the paper in my hand, a mix of fear and anger swirling within me. That motherfucking... I clutched the torn dress tightly against my chest, desperately trying to cover my exposed breasts, and slipped out the door. As I hurried down the hall, my heart was still racing, and I could feel the fabric of the dress slipping, no longer able to properly cover me. The moment I stepped inside, I locked the door behind me and made a beeline for the shower. I needed to wash off the tension, the lingering touch of his hands, the overwhelming mix of emotions that clung to me like a second skin. A loud knock on the door startled me awake, pulling me from the first decent sleep I'd had in what felt like forever. Ever since I arrived here, good sleep has become a distant memory. And now, just when I was finally resting, they decided to interrupt it. Of course, as evil as they are, they would. For a moment, I considered ignoring whoever was at the door, but then I remembered the note, and the camera watching over me. Dinner. Holy heavens, I have to get ready. Panic gripped me as I shot upright, a sharp twinge of pain stabbing through my stomach from the sudden movement. I winced, taking a moment to breathe in and out, steadying myself. When I opened the door, the old woman stood there with two stunning women, one holding a blue dress while the other one had a makeup kit. The old woman motioned for them to enter, but then, with a sharp, sudden command, I told them to wait before slamming the door in their faces. Panicked, I dashed into the bathroom and gasped at my reflection. My hair was a wild tangle, my eyes bloodshot from exhaustion and distress. My cheeks were even more swollen from the morning slaps I had. I took a deep breath and splashed cold water on my face, desperately trying to look somewhat presentable. After drying my face, I opened the door for them. As they entered, the old woman shot me a look that seemed to hold a multitude of unspoken words, but she said nothing, leaving me to navigate the growing tension in the air. As the women worked on me, their hands moved with practiced efficiency. The one with the dress helped me into it, smoothing out wrinkles and adjusting the fit with expert precision. The other one applied makeup with a gentle touch, concealing every imperfection and adding a hint of colour to my bruised face. Despite their careful efforts, I could barely focus on what they were doing. My mind was consumed by the looming unknown. Finally, they stepped back, allowing me to examine myself in the mirror. The dress clung to my body in a way that felt both alien and luxurious, and the makeup had transformed my appearance, if not entirely my state of mind. The old woman who had been observing from the doorway now stepped forward, her eyes scanning the result with approving gaze. "The driver is waiting for you," she said in a clipped tone. "You should go now." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves as I followed her down the corridors. The grand hall seemed even more imposing now, the silence punctuated only by the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor. Once outside, the driver stood by the sleek black car, holding the door open for me. I slid into the back seat, the leather seat cool against my skin. The car pulled away smoothly, and I watched as the mansion's opulence receded into the distance. The drive was interminable, each minute stretching into what felt like hours. The car's tires glided over the smooth road, but the oppressive weight of anticipation made the journey feel heavy and unending. My thoughts were a chaotic whirl, and every moment of stillness only heightened my anxiety. As we approached a towering estate, my eyes widened in awe and fear. The mansion loomed ahead, its walls reaching high into the sky, more imposing than the one I had just left, like it could house thousands of people. The car pulled up the long, winding driveway, and I caught sight of him, standing with an air of authority and command. My heart began to race, each beat echoing louder in my ears as the car came to a halt. The driver opened the door, and I stepped out, feeling the cool evening air against my skin. He extended his hand towards me, his gaze focused elsewhere. His voice was low and gruff as he said, "Don't say anything in there. Whatever happens, keep your mouth shut." I raised an eyebrow, trying to mask my trepidation. Is that even possible? He shot me a sharp look, his grip tightening on my hand until it was almost painful. Understood? I nodded, wincing slightly at the pressure but determined to comply. Understood. He released my hand and slid his arm around my waist, guiding me toward the mansion. The entrance was grand, with an imposing set of double doors that opened to reveal a lavishly decorated interior. As we stepped inside, we were greeted by a man I soon recognized as his brother, Lucian. By his side stood an elegant, stunning woman who seemed intent on avoiding my gaze. When our eyes finally met, she gave me a piercing glare, her displeasure unmistakable. "Nice to see you again, sister-in-law," Lucian said with a wide smile, his perfect white teeth on full display. His wife shot him a sharp look, then turned her glare back to me, her eyes growing even colder.